oppression doesn't just pop up out of anywhere. Oppression has architects. Oppression benefits somebody, and it oppresses somebody else.
What's up? This is your main man, Slink Johnson, tapping in with you one time for the one time. And right now, you watching the Air It Out podcast.
It's your boy Pac Man, the Hood's Voice Box, you know what I'm talking about. And we got another special episode of Air It Out with Pac Man. And this is going to be like a blend this time. You know, I have a segment I call Politics with Pac Man. But this man here is bigger than politics. This is a major player in the city, a man of God. Do you care to introduce yourself to my audience?
Hey, listen, thank you so much. My name is Theron Jackson, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you, brother. And I feel like I'm a 21st century hood revolutionary doing the best I can to be the institution that has been ours, the Black church, as well as knowing that the Black church has a responsibility to the Black community in which it is planted. And so sometimes it sounds like it's new, but it's old. It's what we should be doing anyway, taking responsibility for our place. So, you know, some days I'm a social critic, other days I'm a social scientist. It just kind of depends, man. But I'm one person who is trying to do my part to make sure our people are better when I'm gone than when I came.
Okay, makes sense. When you text me, I seen a whole bunch of letters pop up around your name. What's all that stand for?
Yeah, man. This means sometimes a lot of debt.
Yeah.
But it's those things that speak to the level of education. And I only use them because I paid for them, right?
Right.
So, but, I've been blessed, man, I'm from the projects in Lake Charles, in Louisiana, man. And I was blessed to get a scholarship, and track and field scholarship, Louisiana Tech, and that's where I continued my education. And I was a pretty good student in elementary, middle, and high school, but I was still limited by my income.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thank God that my outcome wasn't measured by that income, and I had a chance because of the gifts that God has given me to be able to not just be a thinker, but also a person who has some athletic skills that opened the door to get me a scholarship, to give me a free education. And so I got a bachelor's degree in business, and then I have a master's degree in divinity. I went to school in Dayton, Ohio at the United Theological Seminary, an old United Methodist Seminary in Ohio. But I have a PhD in public policy from the Nelson Mandela School of Government and Public Policy at Southern University in Baton Rouge.
Okay. Yeah. So did you grow up Methodist?
No, Baptist. Been Baptist. It just so happens the seminary is a United Methodist seminary, but I was swayed toward that seminary from a gentleman who used to preach in Shreveport quite a bit, whose name is Dr. Charles Booth, who was from Ohio and a board member of that seminary. That seminary was I want to say it goes back to 1869, something like that, but it was one of the first seminaries that allowed African Americans to be a part, and they began a Martin Luther King Scholars Program in the late 80s, early 90s. And because of some of the people who I believe to be social justice type warriors in the pulpit who graduated from there, I was drawn to that institution. And so I had a chance to matriculate them and get a Master of Divinity at that school. It meant a lot to me to be able to go to that school. And so that was that. And of course, being able to go to an HBCU, I think is the crowning achievement for all of us who are able to do so. And to be able to matriculate in a program in a school that bears the name of Nelson Mandela was important to me as well.
Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
Why is that name so important?
His nickname, people call him Madiba, but it's because of what he represents, the resilience that he represents. And he is a reminder that it doesn't matter how low society may place us, that is not where they place us that matters, is what's in us that will rise ultimately. And he's that kind of brother. And I think the legacy of being able to be resilient just goes with his name. And it was important to me to be able to have the opportunity to get, a PhD in public policy from not only an HBCU, but an HBCU whose public policy school, if you will, carried the name of Nelson Mandela.
Okay. When you first arrived in Shreveport, what did you see that told you this city was either in trouble or full of potential?
Well, I'm not from here, but I moved here what is now 35 years ago, and I was young right out of college, and I had a job, and so I worked in downtown. I had no idea I'd be there 22 years in downtown working there. But when I came to downtown, it was a different downtown than it is right now. Right, that downtown had a lot of boarded up buildings. The oil and gas industry had just bottomed out, and Shreveport was a victim of not having a real diversified economy at that time. And so, man, it looked like a city that had more history than it had future, like a has-been space. I didn't know all the communities and neighborhoods, so I lived in Moortown, but I worked in downtown. And so as a result, I got to see a couple of different things that were really strange in that the communities were still like the communities where I was from, but the downtown, I had never been in downtown in Lake Charles, Louisiana, where I grew up. I'd never been in one of the buildings like I worked in this building in downtown. So, I didn't really know how to gauge potential in the city because I didn't come here looking at the city as a macrocosm for what life would be for me later. I just came because I had a job.
Right.
And so I had no sense of the lay of the land, no sense of what Shreveport had been, the history, or even anything about the trajectory of its future. So for me, I was just working. And it didn't take long though to find out that I was downtown, and interestingly enough, there's a church at the end of, and I wasn't a preacher when I came to Shreveport in any way, shape, or form. There was a church down at the bottom of Texas Street, right? I noticed you could see that all the way downtown. I didn't know what kind of church it was, but when I would go there, I went to a breakfast. I was on a group called the Homeless Coalition or something. At the time, somebody asked me to volunteer for, but I'd go down there, and where I worked, all the banks were there, insurance companies. I worked with an insurance company, all those big buildings here. But back then, if you look around as a church, but if you look to the right of that, man, it was straight. They used to call it the bottoms, right?
Right. Okay.
Bottoms, and it was not. They used to be bottoms. It was the bottoms.
The bottoms, yeah.
Going that way, you get down to Pete Harris Cafe, all that, man. So it was the Shreveport of 35 years ago. But what intrigued me was the idea that when I stood in front of that church and I looked this way, there were what folks call the citadels of commerce, right? All of this money, right? Mm-hmm. And if I turned the other way and looked right past the church, that was abject poverty. There was still shotgun houses in 1991, still shotgun houses. And you know what the trip really was? Is that when I turned this way, I saw what seemed to be wealth and possibility. Turn that way, abstract poverty. But you know what street I was standing on?
What street?
Common. There was nothing less common than what I saw this way and what I saw that way. And yet the irony was the street was called Common. Yeah. It was amazing.
I'm going to tell you what's crazy. When I think of that, and then you say it's called Common, mm-hmm. and then I think of America. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it is that uncommon. Because, and the reason I say that is because we like to push this theme of one Shreveport. And that's what we strive to be. Mm-hmm. That's more of our optimism speaking.
Absolutely.
If you're telling me based on the direction you walked into money, or you may be walking into, I'm not going to say, I'll say trouble. Mm-hmm. Not because they caused the trouble, but in poverty, you're going to find some trouble. Do you think that was by design, or was that by just the way life played itself out?
So let's I want to say this from the very beginning, that oppression, I just showed my daughter today, oppression doesn't just pop up out of anywhere. Oppression has architects. Oppression benefits somebody, and it oppresses somebody else. Now, a lot of people don't want to hear the word oppression. Like, they're offended by the term oppression. I'm offended by the word poverty, but I see it, right? So for the folks who are offended by the word oppression, perhaps they'll get over it. But the truth of the matter is, oppression has architects, and architects draw and create futures, right? And they do it in a way that other people don't see, but they do it so that other people can see. Mm-hmm. And so architects of oppression benefit from abject poverty, right? Because capitalism requires a
Permanent underclass.
underclass, right? So at the end of the day, when you know there's a consistent permanent underclass, then that is also a symbol or a sign that somebody's doing well somewhere.
Right.
I ain't that far from somebody doing real well. If somebody's really doing, because when we start talking about equity, start talking about everybody's doing well, we don't know that world because we've been afraid. Hate has driven us toward inequity. And little do we know that if you ever find a society where there's equity, you're going to find a whole lot of problems that exist now that go away. There's no such thing. But then there's nobody who then could benefit disproportionately.
Right.
And so it is the notion of greed that creates the need for disproportional benefactors. And they want then to create a permanent underclass. And then that becomes a scenario where now you have a person who can, look, there's enough land on earth for everybody to have some.
Yeah, right.
But not when I got 2 million acres.
Right.
There's enough land for everybody to have some. In an agrarian society that this country or this world began in, if you will, that's everybody's need a little patch. A little patch I can grow whatever I needed for whatever. There's enough land for everybody to have. For lack of a better description, let's call it a quarter.
Right.
Everybody. I can grow food on that, build a house, and that's mine, right? But it's not true when you got 34,000 acres.
Right.
And you got 250 acres. And you got 10,000 acres.
Right.
And you only inherited those because your people came to these yet to be United States at a time when all they had to do was put 4 sticks down and declare that was theirs, take care of it for 3 years, and because of public policy, now you own that. Mm-hmm. And the government picked the winners and the losers.
Right.
Pick the winners, create.
1 second. I don't need nobody calling while we shoot. All right. Okay. Yeah. Tell me what you know about this. I read somewhere that when the settlers were first coming to the United States, that they actually, it was he's a kind of fairly light-skinned man. He worked with the feds his main thing was economics.
Not W.B. Du Bois.
Not W.B. Du Bois. He's still living today.
Oh.
Well, I can't call his name, but long story short, he was basically talking about this monopoly game. And he was saying, Claude Anderson, he was saying that when the white settlers first came to this country, many of them were given a lot of land. And it created an unfair playing field. Mm-hmm. So when they tell black people, to whatever race, they tell them to, kind of like go get it. He was basically saying, ain't that much to get left. like they got like 98%, 99%. And then you want us to be satisfied with the 1 or 2% left.
Yeah. Well, I think a big part is understanding how America was developed, right? When you start talking about land, there was public policy that made the acquisition of land for European people not part of the plan. As I said just now, the plan was if you're of European descent, you come over to America, you get a piece of land, put 4 sticks down, declare this is your property, then you can work that property for 3 years, and then you got it, right? And
right.
It belongs to you. Interestingly enough, though, that after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, one of the things was that black people were supposed to have the exact same scenario, right? They were supposed to be able to do the same thing, except when they followed what happened with that, black people, largely the land that they received, I'm not talking about the 40 acres, but the land they received in this Homestead Act is what they call it, right? Mm-hmm. There was a Negro Homestead Act that was supposed to mimic the Homestead Act that was for Europeans, right? Yes, but when you looked at the total land that had been sanctioned out for the Negro Homestead Act, 88% of that land was taken by white people, and black people had about 12% of that land. That 100% of it was supposed to be for black people. They ended up about 12%, and most of it in swamp land. that was hard to even to do anything with. So, public policy has created winners and losers since the beginning. And people who talk about this notion of how Horatio Alger or pull yourself up by your bootstraps, because we don't tell the honest story about the growth, the history of American development or growth. And the truth of the matter, there are a lot of models you can watch. You start to think about how people made money, okay? And I think people ought to go back and listen. You can easily go, and I guess nowadays people use Google, AI, but go and check it out. Check out the price of cotton, the price of real estate or land, and the price of a slave. And check it out in 1840. Check it out in 1850, and check it out in 1860. Right? As you get into the Civil War and you get close to the end of the Civil War, you will find that land made somewhere probably $1.25 an acre, cotton 50 cents a pound, a slave $600. Right? Get into the 1840s, 1850s, you probably had now land at $2.25, $2, let's call it, cotton at $1 something a pound, a slave $900. Get to the 1860s when the Civil War is happening and close to the end of the Civil War, you find that land, $2.25, cotton all-time high, maybe $1, close to $2 a pound, and a slave, $1,500. Now you tell me how much land you got to sell to get $1,500. How much cotton you got to grow and sell to get $1,500 at $2 a pound, even if I called it $2 a pound. You need 750 pounds to equate the sale of one slave. Let me tell you, they weren't in the cotton and land business only. Real money was from the slave trade. That's where the real money was. And nobody talks about that. But that's where the real money was. Because if you could make $1 a pound, $2 an acre, for $900 for a person, and you don't have any morals, you don't have any soul, technically yourself, and you're willing to see people as property, then which one makes the most business sense, right? And so America grows that way so that now people who are in the slave trade business, not just cotton, not just land, but in the slave trade, because again, I'll give you one more, and I don't mean to jump around, but I'll come back to that piece about where the real money was. And then there are industries like the railroad industry that help. Folks will say that helped to build and develop America, right? The government, public policy created winners such that the Kansas City Southerns, whatever these other people are, the railroad companies of that day, let's call it. Do you know that as they laid track, a part of the incentive program for railroad companies is wherever you lay track, we as the United States government are going to give you 6 miles of land on either side. You have that. So what is happening is people say, well, there's a rationale for that because if you work in the railroad, they build these little towns. And all these little towns around railroads got built by railroad companies, yada, yada. But listen, 6 miles is a long way. And so by the time the rails across America are built, the greatest landowners in America happen to be railroad companies. And even today, railroad companies got old money, right? Nobody looks into that. But guess what they did? They kept the area where they would have towns or where they would have homes for the workers and everything else, sell it. And they make money from the sale of that real estate that was given to them for how much? Free. And you come up and before you know it, and it's in the 1860s, and you got railroad companies, folks in the cotton and textile businesses who have billions of dollars that would today be the equivalent of billions of dollars. And they had it way back then in real money. And money don't decrease in value. It increases in value over time.
So were they the actual laborers or was it still those African Americans or those slaves? Because I guess they wasn't, some of them weren't.
If you talk about people who was actually laying the track,
right.
It's the railroad industry, the companies who made all the money.
Right.
They not only had Africans or enslaved people who were doing work, they brought Chinese people to the United States. And that's how Chinese people come en masse into the United States to build railroads. And they were equally as enslaved, if you will, in the attitude that the businesses had toward them, and they died like this. I mean, they were expendable, and the companies just bring in others, and it was the railroad business, a dangerous business, building rail across the United States, and I think sometimes we forget about those things.
So were the Europeans doing any of the physical labor, or were they more just managerial roles?
No doubt, there's always going to be a mixture of folks who don't reach the level of acumen that their cousin did, who's the manager.
Yeah, right.
They have a job for Bubba, who no matter how you prop him up, you can dress up over ugly, but stupid is the wrong.
Yeah, Bubba messed up.
They got to have some places.
Yeah.
There was a mixture of those. I don't want to suggest that there were not any, but in many cases, those folks got paid.
Mm-hmm.
In other cases, the other laborers did not get paid. And so that's the reality. It's not the truth in every scenario, in every situation, but unfortunately, it was the truth in far too many.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like what you're talking about is things that create generational wealth. And I think when we talk about reparations and things of that sort, I believe that the reason that it is due to many African Americans, I would say those that are already here, not like, new generation, is because they never benefited from the labors of their work.
Yeah.
And them nor their families. Right. And it's not an attack on the Caucasians that are here today that may have, and I'm gonna say this because it wasn't. Well, no. When you're talking about that, these ain't the same. These ain't the same people, but they are beneficiaries from being descendants of those said people.
It's the idea that I've heard a lot of white people say before that I didn't have any slaves. I wasn't rich.
Right.
And I think that's a cheap way to get out of a discussion, right? Because nobody ever said you had slaves or that you were rich. What I will tell you is you never had to get over your skin. You never had to circumvent around what you look like. You may have been poor. You may have gone to public school. All the things that you think are the rationale for me not being what I'd like to be. But the truth of the matter is, what you have to own is that you never had to get over what you look like.
And my thing is, we ain't taking nothing out your pocket, no way.
No.
This money that we talking about is money that is already, gained from taxes or whatever the case may be. It may be certain private entities involved that may have been involved in the slave trade back then. It's them basically doing things that they kind of already do. They just ain't giving it to us.
Well, again, I go back to the problem is who takes responsibility. And public policy has got to be a way of doing it. My scholarship is around, my personal scholarship, my PhD work is around the racial wealth gap, right? And racial wealth inequality.
Which is grown.
Yes. Oh man, it's amazing. But I purposely and specifically my research studied Louisiana during COVID and the years after COVID, the few years after COVID, to see whether or not, 2 years before COVID, 2 years after. So from 2018 to 2022, whether or not the impact of COVID on the socioeconomic factors that portend toward keeping the racial wealth gap in place, were they impacted and whether they exacerbated the gap or did it have no impact?
Tell me if I'm right or wrong. It exacerbated it tremendously. It
exacerbated it not only tremendously, but so much so that any hope of ever closing it went away in that small gap of time. Except it would take some gargantuan public policy to fix it. And I don't think we're ready for that kind of stuff. But it takes, because when public policy puts it together, public policy needs to have a responsibility of fixing it, right? Slavery, let's just use that for example. The way I see it is like a stool, right? 3 legs. And the 3 legs of the stool that kept slavery standing were the economics. If there wasn't no money in slavery, it had stopped a long time, way before it started. So there was an economic leg. And then there was a government leg in that if it weren't legal, you couldn't do it. So you had the government who made it legal. It was worth money. And then you had the third leg, I consider the white church. The white church absorbed the conscience of people and told them it was okay to do what you're doing. And had any one of those legs fought, the institution of slavery would have collapsed. But the white church stood strong, the money was there, and the government made it legal, right? And so if in fact that is the case, then you have to address it through one way or the other, right? And if public policy made it possible, then public policy ought to address. We know that as the United States of America, look at what we've done for indigenous people, from casinos to from a reservation to casino. That was an effort to say, my bad, right? And then you look at what happened in the Japanese who were in internment camps in the 40s, right? There was an effort to say, we ain't ever going to admit we were wrong. It's just an effort to say, my bad, right? And yet, nobody's ever said my bad unless they say it in a statement or writing with no receipts attached, with no checks.
Symbolic.
It's all symbolic, right? And so at the end of the day, it was symbolic, and symbolism doesn't redress reality. And we don't have to guess whether or not there was a value to the work of people who for 250 years nearly, right? 146 years of real hardcore, it wasn't illegal, it was legal, slavery. Then 100 years of Jim Crow and all those other things that ensued. And then all of a sudden the redress becomes some things you do in the 1960s. And now we're 60 years gone from that, 60 years from that. We're 400 years from 1619, if you will, 400 years and 407 years from the time when all of the atrocities began. We are, if you go from 1865, you have to add another 100 years, it's 1965. So you get the 1865 when Texas finally gets the news, right? And you get 1965 when we get a voters' right to act, and the thing that's supposed to make us legitimately full citizens. And here we are now from 1965, 61 years later, they tired. Y'all got too much DEI, too much in 61 years. 100 years of Jim Crow, nothing to be said. The 300 years of the other things that have been abject slavery, nothing to, but 60 years of what they call, affirmative action and those kind of programs, which the beneficiaries of that look more like Clarence Thomas and a few other folks than the general populace of African Americans. So at the end of the day, we haven't gotten any kind of deal. And so I think it's legitimate to always have a conversation of reparations on the table, even when it makes people uncomfortable.
Well, I mean, it makes plenty of sense to me for a white American to be against reparations, because you got to think about this here. If you go back and look at the videos, those same children who used to be, throwing rocks and picking on the blacks and telling them you're not welcome over here. Well, they about 50, 60 now, 60, 70, close to up in that range. So when I see certain people target the black community and have nothing to say about their own community, and they may take on monikers of different animals, it don't surprise me.
Right.
So it's nothing. I have this conversation with MJ a lot. We can go out, say me, you, and MJ, just picking names. We can go out in Shreveport and it could be, let's say, 10 kids drown. In some miraculous way, we save all 10 of these kids. That won't move them people a bit about who we are to them.
Sure.
We still gonna be thugs. We still gonna be degenerate. We still gonna be. They call us racist now.
Well, you don't even have to save kids. Malcolm X ask. You talk about the letters around my name. Malcolm X asked back in the '60s. I don't know if it was on a television show or is this some kind of interview, perhaps akin to this. You know what they call a black man who has gone to this school, got a master's degree, and then a PhD. And he's like, "What do you call him?" He said, "People are like, what?" He said, "A nigga."
Nigga, yeah.
And at the end of the day, man, that has been the framework of the mentality of people about our contribution. And, you know, so at the end of the day, I think we have to be able to recognize that we don't need affirmation from places, that we have to be steadfast and understand that we're not wrong for saying things like reparations. Listen, maybe I could have backed up off reparations. If somebody could have made an intellectual argument to me, maybe I would have. But here's the problem. Whenever we just say, leave us alone. Just leave us alone, right? I had a hoodie I got on in my car. I changed it. I left it in my car from this morning. It says Black Wall Street, right? Because you talk about Greenwood in Tulsa in 1921. That's the 20th century. But even before that, Rosewood, you talk about communities, Edna, Arkansas, communities where Black people say, no, well, first of all, if you could just leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. We ain't trying to be over there. Y'all don't come over here. And we built thriving communities, right? And then you felt like you needed to burn them down. It's for me, if I don't have to talk about reparations if I got a chance to go get it on my own, because we always, from the mud and anywhere else, you can't beat us getting it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't give us a chance to get it. And then when we do get it on our own, independently, you come and burn it. Because we don't come, but I don't understand what the motive is other than evil, right? And so to acquiesce to evil and suggest that I'm gonna be quiet, I'm never gonna ask for reparations anymore, act like it's fair. I don't care how tired you are of hearing it. Imagine how tired people were being in James. And so I don't have a whole lot of tolerance and patience for people who, in their arrogance now, don't want to hear about DEI, don't want to hear about, great, you'll get over it. But at the end of the day, I don't respect their idea of what America means to them and what I can and can't say and who I'm supposed to be as defined by them. That's not freedom.
I'm gonna tell you this, and this is why I have no problem talking to quote unquote racists. I understand it, and I'm finna tell you what I mean by that. At the beginning of the conversation, we acknowledge that capitalism requires a permanent underclass. Mm-hmm. I have a mentor, and he used to ask, he say, "Do you know what the job of a black man is?" I said, "No, what's the job of a black man?" He said, "To go to jail." Mm-hmm. He said, "That's the job. Free labor. We want free labor out you." He say, "It's your job, though, as a black man, to not give them a reason to basically to stay out of there." So I said that to say, I understand why they wouldn't want black people to gain a step ahead, because if we go back, what you say, when you see poverty, somebody doing good, mm-hmm. and whoever doing good ain't trying to give up doing good, because damn them morals, I want this money, right. You know, and this is what I've come to figure, and this is why when I'm talking to a black person, the conversation is different. When I'm talking to a white person, I don't try to appeal to their morality, because that will never work. Mm-hmm. It hasn't worked yet. You got to make it make sense in dollars.
Absolutely.
Think about this. Every time the black community tried, did, or had a leader that was capable of leading them in a positive direction, mm-hmm. they were either assassinated, the community was either destroyed, because a lot of people don't understand. One thing about Black Wall Street was destroyed, but Black Wall Street built itself back up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And through that paperwork, they found a way to
burn them with no matches the second time.
Correct. And that's why I had this discussion, and sometimes it get a little heated, because I say to myself, well, if we do change this thing, who's to say that this same government And I love America. I was an Air Force veteran. I'm riding with America no matter what, even when we wrong, and we wrong a lot of times. Who's to say this same government won't do what they've been doing? They put CIA put crack in the neighborhoods. They had COINTELPRO. One of our presidents said the biggest threat to America is the breakfast program that the Black Panthers were carrying out. Right. And they simply fed the children and educated them. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest threat? Mm-hmm. Education? And that's why I always tell y'all education is elevation. And I get it, because there's this comedian, white man, George Carlin. Mm-hmm. He said, man, America don't want no smart, intelligent people who can sit around the table and talk about what's really going on. Right. Because then we all see how we're getting fucked. I'm sorry, excuse my language. But we'll see how we all getting screwed. Back to the income inequality. People don't understand today, right now, this date we record, America has the biggest income inequality that it's had in the history of its existence. Mm-hmm. And that's greed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
There's no other way to describe that. That's not inflation. That's not you don't have the funding to pay your workers. That's greed. Because the CEO is making money he'll never be able to spend.
Absolutely. Yeah, and say it's an evil that undergirds the system. Greed you talked about is a manifestation of the evil that undergirds the system, and then greed feeds on just a desire, an insatiable desire to just have more, even at the expense of you having anything, to just have more, right? Even more than $1 billion. Number one, you can't earn $1 billion doing any kind of work. Mm. Number two, you couldn't spend $1 billion if somebody gave it to you today. Mm. Which to me suggests if you can't spend it, you can't earn it. And there's something else nefarious perhaps behind how people are, but it's real, right? And a lot of people now are very aspirational towards becoming the next billionaire. Want to be, and no problem with that if that's what people want to do. But I will tell you that it is possible. And what we see prevalent in this country now is the acquisition of resources and the bankruptcy of morality.
Yeah, I agree with Bernie Sanders when he say there shouldn't be no such thing as a billionaire in America. Because first off, I'm gonna say this, it shouldn't be such thing as a billionaire in America as long as we have people living paycheck to paycheck to try to take care of their families. At least pay these people a living wage. That's what the minimum wage was created for. Mm-hmm. It was created to be a living wage, and it hasn't went up since 1992.
Yeah, it's nowhere close to a living wage. There's not a place, I don't think there is a state in the United States of America or a city within those states where a person who's making minimum wage can afford a 2-bedroom apartment.
Right.
Nowhere in America.
And that's almost slavery.
It's immoral in the sense that there are many people who the United Way says they are asset limited, income constrained, and employed. They call them analysts, right? But the truth of the matter is that's and that is a true. They do have that's a wonderful formula, a good program. But basically, they're saying that there's people who still dig ditches in order to earn the money to buy the food to get the strength to dig the ditch. And that's the existence of far too many people who then turn around and vote against their own interests.
Dig
the ditch to get the money, to buy the food, to have the strength to dig the ditch and put a red hat on it. Right? And there's a Turkish proverb that says this: the forest was shrinking, but the trees kept voting for the axe because it had a wooden handle and they thought it was one of them.
My God, that's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah. Hey, I'm gonna tell you what trips me out. What trips me out about this? A lot of people. I love the state of Vermont because they seem to be a little more educated on their politics, but it's also majority white. Mm-hmm. So there's a benefit there. Yeah. So when people vote against the minimum wage, a lot of times they'll say, well, if you raise the minimum wage, price is going to go up. And I say, well, damn it, prices been going up anyway.
Right.
When haven't they stayed on this trajectory of upward? But I will say when they raised the minimum wage in 1992 under, I believe it was Bill Clinton, the prices didn't do what they said they were going to do. They didn't skyrocket through the roof.
And they didn't have to because the wages didn't become more livable. I mean, certainly it's more than that, but it didn't move you to a different tax bracket wage. You still from one minimum wage amount to the next, you remain eligible for earned income tax credits because you are not being moved out of. It is not a system, an open system where you're moving in and out of a different class. From one level of minimum wage, from the time it started to now, that doesn't move a family into a whole nother stratosphere of economics. No, you still at minimum wage. And the people who argue, they don't argue because there's data. No data to support what they're saying. Because if you looked at the data that really speaks to it, you look from 1970, let's say, to now. Corporate profits have done this.
Yeah.
Wages are this.
Quadrupled.
Right? And so if the wages remain stagnant while corporations are making crazy amounts of money,
record numbers,
it's because people don't understand. You take Amazon, for example, with Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos has enough wealth to pay every single, they cut 20,000 jobs. I know that's a couple weeks ago, and they're cutting more. But he had enough money, he has enough wealth to pay every person who works for Amazon a minimum wage, a minimum salary of $100,000. Every person, and never change his tax bracket. Never. But you don't have to do that, but you could do that. That's a game changer, but you don't have to do that, even though you could do that. And so guess what? The wealthy choose not to do those things. And again, it's not, I don't mean everybody, but I mean in this corporate model, an example.
In this top 1% with the monopolies who strategize together because they friends. Yeah, they friends. They in the same rooms. They at some point when you operate amongst the same people for so long, we don't even have to have this conversation anymore. We think pretty much alike. So we don't even have to conspire or anything.
Right.
We know the model. I feel like, again, why wouldn't he do it if he could? Because honestly, what they don't know is you could save your company money by doing it because less people are going to leave. You're going to have less turnover. There's less money you have to spend in training. How do I know? Because there's this guy, I believe his name was Dave something. Every economist got on TV and said, this model that he's running is going to fail. He will be bankrupt soon. His company, it tripled. Mm-hmm. It tripled in profits. Mm-hmm. And he paid every single one of his workers a living wage. Right. Because when you pay me a living wage, I want to come to work. Mm-hmm. My productivity is going to be a little bit better.
Right. Absences go down.
Yeah.
Productivity goes up when people are rewarded fairly. And if you go above fair, you get even more. Mm-hmm. But the minimum wage is not even fair. Right. So it is not even fair wages. So I think we got to start talking about livable wages. And that's what the Alice report with the United Wage kind of structures a scenario where they don't talk about a minimum wage, they talk about a livable wage, right? And a survivability wage. And the survivability wage is significantly higher than a minimum wage, right? Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, minimum wage, if they were being honest about it, should be mired probably just beneath the poverty line a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so I think we got a lot of work to do, but if we don't value everybody as significant, meaning the laborer, the worker, black, white, male, female, if we don't value everybody, then you're starting from a different worldview. And what you and I are talking about don't mean a thing in a corporate boardroom because they don't have the same worldview. Right. Their worldview is about the stockholders' gain. What happens, the return on the stock. If the stock's doing well, we're doing well. They judge their success because the business model is such that a corporation exists to return a gain to stockholders. That's the reason that a corporation exists. Right. And so technically they're sworn to do that no matter what.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna have to get somebody else that's smarter than me to figure that out. Because I don't know how you change that mindset.
Well, let me just tell you, you can also compare that to what's happening with us in Louisiana. Since this is our state, let's just say in Louisiana, when it comes to cities like Shreveport, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Alexandria, Monroe, places like that, where we have mistaken position for power. And we get positions, but we don't really have power. We mistake access for authority, right? And we mistake visibility for victory. And then we mistake what I think to be perhaps representation with liberation. Those are not the same thing.
Not at all.
What happens is demographically, you can't stop the numbers, and people can see that 30 years ago, they knew Shreveport was going to look like it looks today, right? And so what happens is that the architects of oppression bake in the cake so that when they're not there, a racist doesn't have to show up for racism to exist. Because you inculcate it and you incorporate it, you codify it in the documents that govern the system. Mm-hmm. So when we place hope in elected officials, for example, a mayor, a governor, and the moment they go to inauguration and they do this, it's over. Because the moment they swear to uphold the Constitution, they're swearing never to touch the noose that's around the neck of the people who are hurt the most. Because you can't uphold the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Louisiana, the Charter of Caddo Parish, or the Charter of the city of Shreveport, and do things effectively to help people who the charter was never designed to see as full free. Mm-hmm. Right? So as a result, and now let me tell you, oppression has architects, because when this happens and you see it happening and you can't hold off people from position, you can keep them from power. How? Because the state of Louisiana practices what's called constraint, right? So when you elect a black man in New Orleans, you elect a black man in Shreveport or Baton Rouge, the legislature limits the powers of large municipalities within the state. And so that you render a person who is in the role nearly impotent to do anything that is going to progressively change and to align with the hopes of the people who elected that individual. So what happens? Next step, the position is powerless. I placed my hope in that person for the position to help give me some sense of liberation. It didn't do it. Representation never became liberation. And so I'm in the hood now, mad. So I'm doing one of two things. Either I'm not going to vote, or I want to know why I'm going to vote for a black person because I elected them, they ain't do nothing for us. Mm-hmm. Not understanding it was a part of the game the whole time to allow them to have a position and not the power. You now become either apathetic or mad at them, and you end up where Baton Rouge, Shreveport, New Orleans, Monroe, and Alexandria are right now. Mm. The cities still have the same population, but tell me what the mayors look like. Got it? Because that ends up being the architecture of oppression. You have to play this game in such a way that you have to steal hope from the people whose hope would engender them to participate. And then they either don't participate, or when they do participate, they do so in such a way that it is against their best interest.
So I got two things to that. One, I believe that I'm not going to go too in depth on camera because, they play dirty. I believe there is a structure that the white oppressors put into the system for the mayor of Shreveport, because they did not believe there would ever be like a black mayor in Shreveport. Mm-hmm. that a black mayor could take advantage of, that would give black people more power. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna speak on it. We can talk about it off camera. Sure. And I also think that when it does come to Louisiana, the state government, just as they did in Mississippi, mm-hmm. anytime I'm sorry, I don't know if you ever see my channel. Sometimes I get it out of line. Anytime a nigga get out of line,
Mhm.
they can write they can write something in there to draw them right back.
It's constraint. It's what. So tell me is the tools that they utilize. I think we have to be well aware of. One tool is preemption, right? So in the notion of preemption, the state overrides policies that doesn't like. So they'll say you're going to need state permission to build houses in poor communities if you're a city over 50,000 people. Got it?
Yeah.
If cities are over 50,000 people, then you consider urban. We think maybe urban dollars are not being used right, so you have to come to the state for the urban dollars, right? Mm-hmm. And again, it's a way to practice constraint. It's how bonding capacity goes, those kind of things. You come to the state bond commission. So if it's not preemption, then it's charter constraints, right? The people who knew they weren't going to be here 20 years later wrote in the charter locally certain things, and it doesn't matter who takes over. You're still limited to what you can do. I watched when Adrian Perkins was the mayor. I watched it happen in person, and I was mortified that we didn't do enough. And I say we, I mean other council people, perhaps, or whatever, to recognize what's happening. As soon as he gets there, they lower how much a mayor can approve before it has to come back for a city council. Before it was this number. Now when you're there, we're gonna take it down to this number. That's constraint. And they didn't just do that, they did it by resolution, which means now it's law. And so the next mayor and the next mayor are constrained now by that same thing. And then when you find a situation like we have now, where a person comes back, hey, you got to watch it because you may get back there. And when you get back there now, it's like, how we work around it? Now, the council has got to now see how you flip the script. Now, since you now have the capacity to constrain, use that capacity in an intellectual way, or in an intelligent way, I should say, to make sure that you're not hamstringing. By the same token, you have more power, and you got to learn how to use it. So either there's fiscal constraints. They'll pass laws about how much money a group or how much money a mayor, like in the agent situation. That's fiscal constraint. There's charter constraints. There's a preemption. But then there's wealth secession. Baton Rouge is a wonderful example. Y'all got all these black folks over here. We paying all these taxes. We gonna start us another city.
Yeah,
and so they have wealth secession, where wealthier communities take their money, secede from the city, and then start their own municipality and leave all the problems and try to take all the services and the money with them.
Like they trying on Ellaby Road.
Yes.
And so this was my thing. I say, Ellaby Road, you want to go? Go. But you're not going without paying. We're gonna need some billions out you.
No, not only, and I don't want any money necessarily for you to leave. I want money for the pipes that's underground. Mm-hmm. Those are ours. And if you want sirens to blare in your community, those are our fire trucks. Mm-hmm. Those are so you pay us for that. You pay us for our water, and we're gonna charge cities outside of our city way more than we charge people in our city. Mm-hmm. That incentivizes in-migration. Mm-hmm. That disincentivizes out migration, mm-hmm. but you still need my water, right? Mm-hmm. And so as a result, I ain't part of my vernacular. I ain't trying to be around nobody who ain't trying to be around me. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if you're going to get out, it's going to cost you something, player. Mm-hmm. You go out and go and do it because you do have the wealth and the resources to be able to do it. Mm-hmm. But St. George's ought to be bankrolling Baton Rouge, right. East Baton Rouge Parish, right. Because they've decided to leave. You don't get our police. You know how much it costs to start a police force, a fire station. Sometimes they do stuff to get a school. They do stuff to get little things. But if they're not really careful, they will have bitten off their nose to spite their face and find themselves in a place where they can't afford what they live without exorbitant amount of taxes. And that's what you're moving for. You low tax. Now you're out there, you'll have to pay all kinds of taxes. And then some of them say, we'll pay that as long as we don't have to be around. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to, and find, I should say, if preemption doesn't work, and charter constraint, and fiscal constraint, and wealth secession, that's always judicial intervention.
Right.
Take it to the court, let the courts kill it. And now you go on, you can't do it anymore. So I think that all we have seen, whenever we move toward power, the system starts to change power and reorganize itself against that possibility.
Right. I also think, because when Adrian Perkins was elected, I was kind of new to the scene, kind of fresh on in politics. I believe that a lot of the black community, we did them wrong. We did Adrian Perkins wrong. We did him dead wrong.
Getting no objection from me on that.
That he was the man. That was the man. He was doing the right crap.
Mm-hmm.
But I've come to learn that there may be certain players that act as leaders that are getting bankrolled through opposing forces that may not be for the community. And long as these said, leaders, not they call themselves leaders, make themselves leaders. As long as people believing in them and trusting in them, not realizing they don't know what the crap they talking about, they're easily manipulated. And all you got to do is say certain trigger words to them, and it's no talking. So this is my trick. I might play ignorant sometimes, and then when a person come talk to me, as soon as they start talking reasonable, I show them that I'm actually reasonable. Versus you have some people that just downright ignorant. And no matter what you say, they're feeding off that anger because that's what's going to get that camera attention and things of that sort. Right. And we rawed out one of our best mayors.
Oh, no, I think, when the system ties your hands and you can't do certain things like about COVID, and then when the people then blame you, it becomes, again, nothing just happens. It's all, I think, I'm not suggesting one person has put in place this sinister plan, but this system works in such a way where it causes us to look at ourselves in ways that are always more negative than when we look at everybody else.
Right. I think it's one more thing that we got going on in this city that's killing us as far as power. I ain't gonna say no names. We have two forces that need to get they need to get together. There's two forces in the black community that bump heads at the wrong time. When we're running for certain seats, when these seats are so consequential, let them throw all they ducks in the let them split their votes up. We shouldn't do that.
But I think I don't know exactly, and I don't want to even speculate about the forces you're talking about. But let me just say it like this: I think our politics has got to mature to such a way. And I think we're close. We're getting closer.
I think so too.
Maybe we're a few funerals away, but we're getting close.
It's crazy. Somebody said that to me today.
Yeah. So we're getting closer because the fact that we need that you can come up with a name or two. People will always be influential because of their involvement, because of their information, because of what they know, because of their experiences. Those things make you more influential to people who know less and who want to be informed, right? But there's a different side of that coin where I'm ignorant, don't ever want to know anything. I'm just listening to see what you're going to tell me to do, right? We need to be delivered from being uninformed and easy to move, right? And people thrive historically on the ignorance of people and the willingness of those ignorant people to trust me, and all y'all just follow me, right? That's what happened with Jim Jones in Guyana. That's what happened to David Koresh in Waco. People listen, and religion is one of those things that people do. But it's the same thing when it comes to whether it's politics, whatever it is. We have got to become more informed as voters, as citizens, as community members, as people, so that we're not getting all our information from social media. And at the same time, we're not getting all our information from any one singular source. And then when we do get it, what are we trying it by, right? Robert told me that, okay, but who else, right? And one person, it's hard to believe that one person has garnered the authority to be the voice on everything that matters.
Right.
Dangerous.
It is, because for one, I might be more educated on this matter than I am on that matter. You might be more educated on this matter than I am on that matter. I may have a different perspective.
Right.
You may have a different perspective. I'll give you an example. When the data center first came, I was going off of generic information.
Mm-hmm.
So I initially came out against it. But as I got more educated and I was in these rooms and I got to actually hear what the difference was.
Right.
I was able to come out and give a more informed opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did the opinion of those, I'm just going to be honest with y'all, that was against it, not only did they didn't matter because it was coming, they were uninformed by what they was talking about. And when I would come on certain people things, I would say, well, let's talk about this. Let's add me to your life. Let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying this to embarrass you. I'm saying this to have a conversation to where we can understand, because your emotions shouldn't be tied to information. No way. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to learn in real time in front of people. There's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of people will take that as an attack. They will say, you attacking me by doing this. Well, brother or sister, you won't talk to me. And I'm trying to give you the information. Why do you think some people get so dug in?
Again, I think very often that you have people who are advocating positions, not trying to hear the truth. They come with a and I don't know if it's preconceived. They come already with their mind made up about something, and they're advocates for something, and it's either it's going to benefit what I advocate for or it's not, and they take sides based on that. Very few people are taking sides based on how they're being informed, right? They are taking sides based on whose side somebody told them to get on, and who's on this side that I recognize versus who on that side. If somebody I don't like is on that side, even if it's good from over here, because I just don't want silly. That's silly. That makes absolutely no logical sense. And as a result, the problem with that is not that kids do it. The problem is that adults in position of responsibility will do it. That they will not support something that would benefit their, let's call it districts or city or areas, because of who else is supporting it. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
We've become
insane,
hyper political to the detriment of the benefit of people in our communities. And when that happens, you're too stubborn, you're too immature to be an elected official. You are not a representative of the people. You have brought your own concerns, your own frustrations to this, and that's not fair. When you get elected by people, you don't get elected by one group of people. You try to convince everybody, say it's a district, your district vote for you. Some people who liked you, some people didn't. They just decided to take a chance on you. You owe them too. So when you go just to make up your mind and what you think, people did not elect you because you were the smartest person in that district.
Right.
They elect you because you ran as a person willing to be a spokesperson for them in that district. And you owe it to them once you get elected to try to hear as many voices as you can and make sure when you make a decision, even if it's against what you would do, what if the majority of your district says that's what we want you to do?
Right.
And there have been a lot of cases where the majority of the district, if they were polled, would be against something that their representative does. That to me is not democracy. That is electing somebody to be an authoritarian in a physical geographical space. That's not good anyway. Whether it's a whole country or one district, that's still bad.
Right. Marjorie Taylor Greene. I really can't stand her. And I think she's not that intelligent, just being real. But I seen her come out against Congress people holding stocks, owning stocks. That makes sense to me.
Well, it does, except when you remember that when the tariff scenario began, under this current administration, she was one of the people benefiting from the stocks, and she wasn't even ashamed. She put it on her page and showed people that she was buying I forgot what it was, whatever that's some number that they use for these particular stock. And she was one of the people who was bragging about how many thousands of dollars she was spending on purchasing those while the prices were bottoming out. And then Donald Trump comes back, I don't know, was it 10 days later or so, and changes, reverses course on the tariffs, and the companies went.
Yeah.
That's what happened to people who bought the stock.
Yeah.
And she was one of them. So, I mean, it's easy to get religion after the benediction.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? She's gone from there now.
Yeah, so.
She knows what's happening, and so maybe she discovered the error of her way. I don't know.
Maybe not. We have a saying, when I talk to MJ, and we say it a lot of times, we say, well, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't care why they doing it. I don't care if they doing it for good intentions or bad intentions. If it fits the agenda that will help Black people, and that, I'm not saying that in particular because that helps almost everybody, but I'm with you. Because I know a lot of you crooked anyway. I told you, when I talk to a racist, I don't talk to him for morality's sake. I'm talking that pocketbook.
Strange enough, man, you talking Bible. That's what you said, but there's a New Testament scripture that speaks to the fact that some people who like, I'm thinking, if I use our vernacular, there's some people out here who preaching for money. Other people out here preaching because they want people to know who Christ is. Other people preaching Christ for money. And the writer says, notwithstanding either way, if Christ is being preached, that's beneficial. Not endorsing preaching for money, not endorsing any particular license, but suggesting that with the volume that's happening, that people will be, hey, whatever. My point is the position you took is not foreign even to people who call themselves readers of Scripture and followers of Scripture.
Makes sense. We're in election season right now. What does this moment feel like to you?
All too normal, I guess what I would say, because we're approaching a perpetual election cycle, an election season, where 26 we'll be electing a mayor, a city council, school board, and those kind of things, public service commission, those kind of things. And then next year we'll be electing commissioners and state legislators, governor, that kind of thing. And the following year we'll be electing congressmen, the president, senator, those guys. So we're in a 3-year cycle of elections. And so I think what has to happen for us is we need to make up our mind that there is a responsibility we have as it relates to our participation, decide whether or not we're going to live up that responsibility, figure out how to scale that among more of our people, and then hold accountable those people who have received our votes. And so, I know that's probably overly simplified, but it's also clear that the game has begun as well when it comes to being election season. And so a lot of people question the motives of folks running for office, those kind of things. I don't do that anymore. I do know this, that history has taught us, at least over the last, let's just call it 20 years, that more than one Black can run for anything and only one Black's going to win. Okay? People talk about the threat of dividing votes and what they call it, splitting votes and all. Listen, we're more mature than that in this city. Whether I take you back to the 2006 race where there's these people running, only one person is going to win that, right? And they distinguish themselves among those who were in the race, including other Black people, and won. And the same thing happens in 2014 to some extent, but also and again in 2018 when Adrian Perkins was elected, because Ali Tyler had been the mayor for one term, right? And she was historical, not because she's the first woman. Maybe historical, maybe because she's the first Black woman, but not historical because she's the first woman. She wasn't the first Black. She may have been the first Black woman, but she was really historical in a way that people miss. And thus, I believe why we had a one-term scenario. We come back and we saw another one-term scenario. I don't know that people paid attention to the background and the context of those rationale. And for me, it was this. Tyler was the first person in Shreveport modern history to ever become the mayor who had not served on the city council. First person. Adrian Perkins was the second person who became the mayor who had not served on the city council. And what ends up being, some people will suggest, and history will write, that there were tumultuous administrations. I don't think so. I think there's always good and bad in all administrations, but they didn't bring with them the experience of having been local elected officials to know what came along with this, not only the service as a local elected official, but the responsibility and the politics. And I know Mayor Tyler, I remember saying, and I used to get a little squirmish when I hear her say it. And she was saying, "I'm not a politician." I mean, but you ran for office, and if you run for office, you are now in politics, and everybody who is operating in politics are politicians. Well, I think she was trying to say, I'm not a dirty politician. I'm not a lifelong politician.
Right.
But you are, in fact, a politician. And if what was governing your mentality is, I'm not a politician, and so I'm not going to do it the political way, then, yeah, you guarantee yourself it's one term. And,
Right.
Because politics is, I was with a senator, U.S. Senator last weekend. He said at least twice that politics is the art of who gets what.
Right.
And then, okay, if that in fact is the case, then you need to be a politician because there's only going to be so much what?
Yeah, war resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so who gets what, where, and when. And so I think that when you go back and watch that to this election season, I think local elected officials who run for other local jobs, even if it's the mayor or something like that, those kind of having local experience does in fact matter. Does in fact matter. Both for the candidates who ended up in the runoffs after Ali and Adrian were both defeated from their office, ended up being two older guys who both had been city councilmen before, who've been local elected officials as well as in one case a state elected official. So that experience begins to matter to the electorate when they get confused. Sometimes they go back to what they know, and they look for somebody to have some kind of experience. When it looked like we go way this way or way this way, somebody say, "Hey, get us somebody to get us back right."
Right.
And I think that's the other question we have as a city. When we have people, let's just call it above 70, right, or whatever the ages may be, there's nothing wrong with that. But where are the 30-year-olds?
Right.
Where are the people who have got to live with the decisions that are going to be made longer?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think there needs to be a good mix because there is wisdom in having been there. But you also need the energy and the innovation of people who don't just see it the way they've always seen it.
Mm-hmm.
They can see things differently. And when you get that balance, I think you got what a city needs. And I'm concerned when I say school board, when you have people who, I think there need to be more parents on the school board, right? Whose children have to live with the decisions that they make, right? It's easy to make decisions in a school system where nobody in your family is touched by those decisions, right? And we can't require that, but I'm saying as voters, we ought to be more in tune and more wise about who we select, because if they have no skin in the game, they're just trying to establish a name for themselves. They're trying to build a brand. They just want to be something. Why? Right? You're like, why? You never, you went to school 6 years and now you want to be the school board, right? Mm-hmm. So you expect people in the school board to have to value education. It doesn't mean you have to have a PhD to be on the school board, right? But you ought to have some sense of what it means to do education policy. School board is not starter politics, and too often is looked at as entree to local politics. Start down here at the school board and working.
School board got one of the biggest budgets.
Important political subdivision in this city, because it does more to impact our future than what one could argue any other board around here does. Because it's educating our children. Right. And so I think to send less than our best and brightest to that responsibility says a lot negative about us.
Let's switch to the mayoral race.
Sure.
He's running for mayor. Mm-hmm. What do you see as her strengths?
Well, I think it's really twofold. One, I think of it as two directions, right? And when a person's able to operate in two directions, it's a major strength to me, so that you are connected to the community. So people know who you are. You started from a grassroots perspective, never lost contact with the grassroots, run a business every day, in the community. So, people of different ilks, whether you're involved in this, that if she's connected with the community, that kind of person, but she's also a proficient public servant, right? So having been, a mother, she's a mother who is dealing with sons and husband, but her youngest son, who was a sickle cell warrior, man, who has challenged the family to adjust themselves to the reality that he's going through, and that's a lot on a parent. But the love of a parent for a child says, "Yeah, what else we gonna do? We're here." So she's been able to manage those kind of things in life, and yet still be able to manage to be a proficient public servant. I say proficient public servant because she's served for at least a dozen years, I think, or so now, in her district as a cattle commissioner. But even as a commissioner, she's done a couple of things that I think to be important. She's been the president of the commission itself, the leader of those leaders who've been elected. But then she's also served around in a statewide perspective with police jury. Well, everybody besides us calls them police jurors. But as in the police jury association, she's held roles in the police jury association. So she's been a leader among her peers, not only on a local level, but around the state as well. She's been, I know, the chairman of the Black Caucus of Police Jury Association as well, a couple of times. And so those responsibilities take you outside of this municipality. So, a person knows how to govern and deal with other people, but also is still proficient at the job she's elected to do right here in Shreveport. So I think there's no way to practice for being a mayor. But you have to bring to it what you bring to it, and it becomes what you bring to it. Right. And so but I still believe, as I was saying earlier, that being a local elected official matters when you go to the mayor's office. That had Mayor Tyler or Mayor Perkins been both when they ran, I was supportive of both of them when they ran, but that they would have been perhaps more proficient starters. They ended up having to be as strong as they could as closers. And then both of them met a similar fate when it came to a second term. People didn't prove to be patient around here, man. We're ready to jump off wagons so quickly. And that has, I think, a little to do with how can I say this? With the warped expectations of people who believe that positions mean power, that access means authority, that representation means liberation. And as I said to you before, visibility ain't victory. At the end of the day, you have got to find a way to navigate around. I've heard conversations about who's been the best Black mayor. Well, they've all suffered from the same fate of powerless positions at times, because they operate under constraint. And everybody's looked at them with a jaundiced eye because they didn't look like every mayor before them, right? So we're still in a cycle of the city maturing to a place where we're comfortable seeing somebody who doesn't look like us being the mayor, that others are as comfortable as we are at seeing somebody be the mayor who doesn't look like us. They got privilege says they don't ever have to be comfortable, right? But you got to get comfortable at some point, right? And we got to give them some practice. And so I think there's another opportunity to give them some practice.
That's another thing I think we do in our community. I think sometimes, and don't get me wrong, I think you should carry yourself professionally. But I think sometimes we do get too caught up in the aesthetics of how a Black person should look in office versus the mindset that they have or the intelligence that they have. Because you may have somebody that looks the part, but where does their interest lie?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm always leery of people will abandon the distinctives in order to try to align with people who are never going to see you as them, right? And so there are people who decide to change everything about themselves, hoping that they'll be acceptable when the people who will never accept them come around to inspect them, right? And so at the end of the day, you've got to get comfortable. If there are people who are still wrestling with that, in this age, in this day, shame on them, right? That, people believe because if I shave my mustache and beard off, then I'm clean cut, right? That you can be a clean cut thief, right? They're clean cut murderers, right? But if I have locks, I got a beard, I'm suspect. Because I look like the usual suspect because I don't. Yeah. At the end of the day, right? So I will suggest you that when we mature beyond image and judging books by their cover and move to what people deliver, what people are, not how they look, but how they think, and then how that thinking portends towards some type of action, progress, and benefit for us as a community. Not what you look like, but how you think.
If you remove personalities, what does Shreveport need most from its next mayor?
Well, they need a mayor with a personality. We still need a mayor with a personality, but I will just suggest you that we find ourselves in a situation where we are still bragging about our potential, and at some point that gets real old. You too young to know this, but I ran for mayor in 1998. I was 29 years old, and I was 29 years old, and my opening speech in the spring of 1998, when I announced my campaign, one of the things I said is that this city has the word potential stamped across it. And that means a lot for opportunity, but it also means we haven't maximized what we could have. And so if all we have is a stamp that says potential, it also might mean we haven't done anything. Right. So I was talking about bringing Shreveport together and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of ways to read that, bringing it together. But for me, it was about understanding that Broadmoor couldn't prosper and Moortown go down, that the Cooper Road couldn't go down and Elgin Road keep going up. Right. And those are my thought processes. But the truth of the matter is they showed us, yes, it can. Right. But it can only if the people who have the responsibility fall asleep at the wheel. And so I think we need people who are prepared to move past the conversations of potential, find what's practically working for us, exacerbate that, and find ways to accentuate the things that are working and are positive, and then find ways to eliminate and minimize those things that are so divisive that they kill our energy when it's time to move forward together. So, and by together, I mean men, women, boys, girls, this side of town, that side of town, black, white, whatever you want to say. There's always a tool for division. I think by nature, humans are people who will help each other, but there are people who are evil who sow seeds of discord. And discord ain't natural, but it has to be taught by somebody. And it is, because we circle back to the beginning of our conversation, because oppression has architects. And it is not a positive thing for folks to work together and all work together, to be together in one accord. Oh, no, you got to do something about that. You go back to 1865 when now we have this, we're in this period of Reconstruction. And now all of a sudden you got black senators, black legislators in Louisiana, black senator from Mississippi, black people. Why? Not because the sheer number of black people who are able to vote now, but because poor white people and poor black people have a similar interest. And they now start working together. And guess what happens? Boom. So guess what we got to do there? We got to disorganize that. We got to sow some seeds of discord and stop that. That's why Fred Hampton's sleep right now. Same kind of rationale. Because poor people, union folks and black folks and poor white folks all getting together, it has always been a threat to the wealthy elite, to the powers that be, to see people who have reasons to be together come together, because it does not serve their interests.
When you said that, my cherry was on my mind the whole time.
Yeah.
when I was in the military, one of my closest friends was this redneck named Vincent Crowley, and I don't want to call him a redneck because he called himself a redneck. When it came down to certain situations, he had my back the most out of everybody. And that's why I tell you, I don't have no problem talking to a racist. Because most of the time, racism don't stand up to face value.
Right.
Once you get to know a person, you'll realize you're more similar than you
It's
are.
just an excuse to be ignorant.
Yeah.
Right.
The thing I see in this city, and I'm just gonna be bluntly honest, and I don't care who get mad. It seems like, to me, Black people will vote in the interest of this city long as they are informed. White people will vote in the interest of this city if they have the right person in office. So Adrian Perkins would propose certain things and it gets shut down. Tarsano would essentially propose almost the exact same damn thing and they pass it. Why is that?
I think sometimes our miseducation requires it. When you have the belief that somebody's ice is colder than yours, somebody's sugar is sweeter than yours. It was Carter Woodson in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro. I'm paraphrasing, who says that when you control a man's mind, that's pretty much all you need. You got everything. You can control everything. Said if he says something like that, if a person's used to going through the back door and you get to a building there is no back door, he'll build one because his education necessitates it. And so there's sometimes that people who have such a sense of self-hatred and self-deprecation that that they only believe things are good when it comes from somebody other than them. And they're suspicious of anything that comes from somebody just like them. That's a wrestling match that's going on in their head that it's hard for us to touch anything with that. And but I hope that people will become vigilant about being an informed electorate. And if they're willing to be an informed electorate, then we can deal with everything else up the road. It's just this ignorant mass of people who will blindly follow that's bothersome, right? I think you should have to convince individuals, convince individuals. You got influence, people have influence. There ain't no sin to have influence. You got to use it in ways, though, that are positive, and you shouldn't be able to say one thing and influence this whole group, right? If I'm going to use my influence on him, so it should require conversations and information. I should be able to question you back and forth about what it is. But we live in this time of social media where we count how many people watching us, how many people liked us, how many people, we need to be liked, we want to be watched. And all those things that make us crave attention don't make us more prepared. And that's the scary part, because no matter how ignorant a person or thing may be, more likes and more views will make them more prepared. Right? It just exposes you as the person who's unprepared. Right. And so I think we still got a lot of work to do to begin to have people be confident in the fact that you can make a decision based on information, but you got to get yourself informed to go vote. It's not going to happen anytime soon. Before you were born and when you were a kid, elections around here, people believe so much in that kind of process that people would send out ballots in the mail, and folks would just wait for the ballot to go vote. Just send out a ballot and say, these are the 12 people to vote for. These are the 6 people to go vote for. And they check because they don't, today is election day. They got one of them ballots. Or they know it's election day because somebody sent a ballot in the mail. Oh, man, I'm going to do this. Yeah.
Amongst family members and everything.
Yeah. I'm going to the poll and leave my ballot. I didn't research any of these people that just got the ballot. And so some people say it's because you trust the person who sends the ballot. But sometimes the person who is on the take, right? They send the ballot out because you trust them. And they don't even know these people on there, right? And so you have to vet people for yourself. And I don't blame anybody who's out here hustling, because they have to have somebody to hustle, right? And we need to make up our minds we're not going to be hustlers. And give the hustlers put the hustlers out of work by giving them no market, right? And I think we'd be better off.
Yeah. I had this conversation with Rudolph Flash one time because that's my cousin.
Okay.
He was saying, he was telling me basically like, man, some of these people don't even know who such and such is, talk like council persons. And I said, well, I'm gonna be honest with you. Being that I come from because I've always been in two different environments almost my whole life. So I've been in this hood environment, and I've also gone to. So I go to Claiborne, then I go to Shreveport. I go to Middle Magnet, and then I go to Hollywood. You see what I'm saying? So it's like I always been back and forth between these different environments. When I'm in hood school, when I'm out in the neighborhood, these conversations barely come up. Right. So what you think a person would know because we're engaged in this is many others that aren't. Right. And you got to bring them into the fold. And you have to be patient with them because some people consider them apathetic. Perhaps they're just people who believe in accountability. Because when they've been told that these folks run and lie about what they're going to do, and you can't, there's only so much you can do. And when you run and don't deliver, people are like, then how many times do you have to fool me for me to stop being interested at all, right? And so that's people who have withdrawn from the process because the process has, do or die, whatever it might be, I'm going to try to stay involved. Everybody's not like that. And life is lifing for people. And folks work 2 jobs and 3 jobs trying to put children through school, trying to keep food on the table. And they don't have time to be talking about, who's running for, Cattle Parish Commission District 2, that kind of thing. Well, they don't know what district they live in, man. They ain't carrying around a voter's card on their phone and what. Man, when we vote, like this year, oh Lord, and some of them were still faithful enough to go and vote, but they don't have time to educate themselves before they go vote. That used to be the responsibility, we would say, of the politician. No, it's always been the responsibility of the voter to educate themselves, because the politicians or the people who are advocates for any particular side of something or person is going to tell you the good parts about that person, right? You have to do your homework and vet to be sure your vote represents the responsibility that you owe to yourself and your family and the people you represent too. Hope that makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. So we have city council races. We have Tabitha Taylor, Alan Jackson, Ursula Bowman, me, Billy Anderson running for city council. What should voters evaluate beyond campaign slogans?
I think capacity to understand. I think voters, if I could coach voters and just tell them, if I had a podcast, or I had a reel, and I said, I'm going to coach the voters. First thing I would say, don't go for the okie doke, right? And what I mean by that is, there is no single individual who's running for council who can do anything by themselves. Nothing. No promises of council. They can say, I'm going to fight for you. That's great. But, some boxer fought and lost every fight, right? And so, how am I a consensus builder? And what proof do you have? Have you seen that I am able to build a consensus, either with people who think like me or people who do not think like me? Because one vote will not deliver you anything, right? So do you understand the process of governance, right? Do you understand how to win? I don't mean how to win an election, but how to get things done and move forward. And I think that's the big thing. And so for some, the one way to measure that is, have you done it, right? For those who are running for re-election, look at the times they have and say, I guess they know how, right? For those who are aspirational about it, is there anything you can show me that shows me that you've done this? And guess what? That person may say yes, and show me that
2 or 3 people on the city council has endorsed them. You know, say, hey, you seem like you're building alliances, and that matters rather than just popularity contests that we have in districts, who we just elect people who are popular with no sense of their capacity, not to be popular, but to be effective. Because being popular is not being effective. Everybody can like you and you not be effective. And your track record will say whether or not you're effective. Not just because people will tell me, count the number of things, I put on this street. I bought it. But what if I didn't want them things? Right? How many things that we need and we want that you brought? So you say I brought 25 businesses. Hey, well, you cooking with grease, because one thing we sure need is jobs, right? And then why can this councilman, I think it's like Councilman Jackson over in E, who has a plethora of businesses who have moved to District E from the Cedar Grove area, from the edge where I guess he represents Cedar Grove, all the way out to Williamson Way out there, AT&T. Well, businesses have just popped up. I don't know how many new houses out there, but it's got to be some rooftops if the retail is out there. And the kind of thing, you got to say, well, how can we do some of that in some of these other districts as well, right? And what's the rationale for doing it? But you got to give them a thumbs up, because the councilman doesn't do that. You got to own the business to move it over there. But the councilman can be a person who is an advocate in such a way that red tape process is made much easier, that the city is friendly to those persons who are looking to do those kind of things. They can help navigate zoning scenarios, all kind of things that you could do to help businesses come to that area. And so I think, whether it's a good grocery store on a cover road that they talked about having and they're making headway toward, those kind of things that show leadership, our streets getting repaired, over on Pines Road in the area where I've always represented, streets getting repaired. I appreciate Councilwoman Bowman, because streets matter too, right? I like some Starbucks, but if I'm gonna tear up my car getting to the Starbucks, then what good is the Starbucks for me? I like to be able to drive to Starbucks and back home in such a way. So when you start seeing those things come together, like, okay, because a councilperson can only do so much as it relates to getting things passed, but they have a lot of influence in their district. Once the city's budget, particularly the capital budget and otherwise, has been set, they can have a lot of say and sway over where the priorities are. But you have to also have a relationship with the mayor to not have to at least have a fight, because the city council determines how much money gets spent. The mayor signs the checks, right? The mayor picks the projects and signs the check. The council has to okay the money. Right. So, hey, I would say, hey, stop okaying the money so you can make sure you got the right checks. Right. And you got to make sure that y'all have checks and balances, no pun intended, but y'all are doing things the way they should be done. And you have a lot of power and leverage to do things the right way. But when you have a majority of the council working together, that's power. 4 or 5 people on the council who can speed things up or slow them down, that's power.
And I think that would be the difference in electing that type of a city council, because I do think they will work together.
And they can move things, they could demand with a progressive mayor, with a person who is innovative and open to a future that we may not see now, but that we need to see in the future. They can move the city forward in a lot of ways. But we sometimes have a little problem because people like to compare us to other places, right? And particularly like to compare us to across the river, right? The problem
is totally different.
Yeah. When you have a homogenous scenario with everybody who all look alike and think alike, it ain't hard. The things they fight about ain't the same kind of thing. But when you have to represent everybody and everybody matters, then it's different. It's harder. It's like parties historically. You had a party where it's all white men mentality. And so white women, black folk who join that party, you better have a white man mentality, because that's how this goes. Come to this part over here, it's everything. It's rainbows. And you got to figure out how to manage all these. Over here, you really got to manage all this stuff. There ain't no room for you over here. But here where you got all of this stuff, you got to figure. So it's tough, and there ain't no simple answers. And thus, sometimes the problem with the Democratic Party, it's all kind of stuff, right? And it appears that the Republican Party may be moving faster, but it's just that they engage in more groupthink than they are in diversity. Matter of fact, I don't even like the word diversity. So they able to kill that kind of spirit. So.
Did the Democratic Party of Louisiana screw Gary Chambers?
I don't remember what does that mean. When did I don't remember what happened
when he ran for
U.S. Senate?
He was the most favored to be endorsed, but the Democratic Party didn't endorse him. For the first time, they endorsed 3 different candidates.
He was one of them. Or instead of endorsing a single candidate, they endorsed 3. Yeah, I mean, it's that kind of lack of courage that have defined parties in different instances. And it sounds like, and again, I don't remember enough detail about that to talk with any authority, but just to hit a scenario, sometimes you cut off your nose to spite your face, and a lot of times it's about placating people in the party. And quite frankly, none of whom can win.
And that's what was crazy. I heard this, including not a black politician mouth, that Gary Chambers just can't win the state. But he got the most votes by a lot.
Really? So I don't know that. Who did he run against? Kennedy?
It was this was in the how it go in Louisiana. You had the first one.
Yeah, in the primary. The primary. And then the general election.
Yeah, and the primary.
We have jungle primary, right?
Yeah. So it was one of them. Was it Kennedy in that one?
I can't remember because Cassidy last ran in 2020, right? And Adrian Perkins was in that race.
Where it could have been that.
Right. So it would have to have been in 2022.
Yeah, it was because he was like, that's when he did the crackhead joke.
What was that?
He was like,
when Kennedy did the crackhead. Okay, yeah, that was 22 then. Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you this is what I like about Kennedy. I don't like none of his policies. I ain't gonna sound like none of them because I ain't read every last policy, but I don't like most of his policies. This is what I like about Kennedy. That man don't talk like this.
Man, he's a turncoat actor, character. This guy used to be Andy Griffith when he talked. He was a Democrat and he ran for governor in 2000 and I think 2000, early 2000. So let's just call it 2003. Maybe he ran for governor, and he was a Democrat running for governor. Obviously he didn't win, but he served in statewide office. This man is a Rhodes Scholar, right? Mm-hmm. And if you ever hear him away from the cameras, he doesn't sound much like he sounds when he talks about, if you want to make an omelet, you got to crack some eggs, and all the stupid stuff that he says, man. He is. I think he has decided to try buffoonery, and I don't know why he's had to reduce himself to buffoonery. But I guess if we're talking about him, the sound bites and all those things, it's just, those sayings. And I mean, this, that kind of, and maybe that's who he is. And if that's who he is, that makes him not the kind of representative that can represent all people.
I don't think that's who he is. I think that's what he think about Louisianians.
That's sad. We deserve people who see us as better than that, if that's the case, But he just seems, if there's any word that I could think of, is disingenuous. Just disingenuous.
Being that a lot of our state representatives don't really have the numbers to force anything,
right?
What do you think their role is in politics as far as getting things put into the laws or accomplished. Because I've had a conversation with one state rep. I won't say his name. We gotta rekindle our relationship. It's his belief that sometimes you gotta scratch the back to get your back scratched. But it's my belief that you're scratching their back and they making the fool out of you.
Mm-hmm.
Because they know you don't got the votes to stop shit.
Right. Facts. Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing that, from my view, from me watching politics a long time, 'cause I've been watching politics, I think you're playing more to corporations than you are the people of Louisiana.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's always interesting. Couple things. First of all, when it comes to state elected officials, very often state representatives, senators who represent local areas, very often people probably know the least about what they do, because what's seen as most of their transactions happen in Baton Rouge, right? And that's the structure of things. You go to Baton Rouge to represent us, but you're in Baton Rouge. So like next week or whenever when the session starts, they're going to be in Baton Rouge for most of the time, and nobody is really doing a day-to-day watching. If you're on the city council here, you're on the press commission, school board, you're right there, right? You're on this channel, you're online on this thing, or somebody can come and sit right in the chamber and listen and watch. If that's the case, there's a sense of anonymity almost when you're at the state level. That being said, given the fact that you have over 70, somewhere around 70 Republican legislators in the state house, it makes it a very ultra red. Out of 105, they are veto proof, and the extent to which African American representatives can adequately and in any way strongly represent the people who they represent. Because again, remember, in that district, sometimes it's white people in that district as well. So, they got to deal with all this as well. But for those who suggest that they will really represent us, it's hard when you're in a super minority. They're in a super minority. I once joked with one of the state representatives, said, why don't you just make sure they got your address and get your check? Nobody will be mad at you and go down there. Because when you go down there, and then you see people sometimes they go to the floor, they bam on the microphone, they say things, and they get FaceTime on media. But at the end of the day, no agenda has been advanced. And so that's the sophomoric view of it that people like me or others might have, because we're not down there. On the flip side, there may be some small things that they can intervene in, support somebody, and get $100,000 for this or $200 at home, but they're not bringing home major projects if they're not aligned with their Republican counterparts who are part of the group that comes from this area. And it's important now more than ever that they would have to end up aligning themselves with people who are part of the delegation from Shreveport to have their voices heard, quite frankly. And so the extent to which they are wise enough, smooth enough, slick enough, whatever the right term is, to make sure that they can tie their interest to somebody else who is going to win, or at least going to be on the winning side, then I think you have to do those kind of things. You have to be really creative in this era when people don't have to give you anything. You don't have enough numbers to do anything. And we don't have enough. The Black Caucus as a group, I think it's a bunch of wonderful people, but they're not a bunch of, they don't represent a power block. When you got a veto-proof, largely white legislature, House at least, and Senate, quite frankly.
It's my belief that we have Democrats in Louisiana, but I don't think we have a Democratic Party. And what I mean by that is I think our Democratic Party in Louisiana is on the right party. Mm-hmm. It's a conservative party. That's why when Gary Chambers ran, because he's he's a true progressive.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That's why I feel like the party couldn't get behind him, because he's not of the party. He's of he fit more in a California Democratic Party.
Sure, yeah.
Do you think that will ever change, or do you have a different belief when it comes to our Democratic Party in Louisiana?
Yeah, so for the sake of transparency, I'm not a Democrat. And so I'm not a Republican, so I don't want anybody to mess that up either, right? So I've been non-party affiliated, probably for 20 years now, so something like that. But if you were to follow my voting record, I may as well be a Democrat in the sense that I vote for people who think most closer to what I do, right? And so it is aligned that way. But nonetheless, I think parties in general are flawed these days because they supersede voices and they become the mega voice, right? And so some people run behind them and hide and benefit from them. Other people make them difficult and they diversify them, which then splinters them, which renders them almost ineffective because they are designed to group people together as a block and go and do something. But when you got the block being, broken off, then it kind of works against the notion of party, right? And so the question is, who does a better job at groupthink, right? And it appears that when the simple-minded agenda of the Republican Party takes sway over what I think to be anything really, not just progressive, but anything meaningful, quite frankly. A lot of it is mean-spirited. A lot of it is racist. A lot of it is a lot of those things that just don't help to bring Louisiana above where we are. And what we've known is that a history of racism, I don't know how old Louisiana is, the history of racism in Louisiana has kept us at the bottom. And we remain at the bottom because we have not, I think, valued the gifts of everybody in our state. And so until we do that, I think we're destined to continue to find ourselves equally as racist and still at the bottom of every good list and at the top of every bad list.
Okay, so we running out of time here, so I'm going to ask these questions. I'm going to ask you to try to keep it a little shorter. The water crisis has shaken confidence in local leadership. Is this an incompetence, underfunding, or a deeper systems failure?
I think it's a collision of all of the above. That people knew that our water system was old. Those pipes, clay-looking pipes, I guess you call them, that were there since 1979. There have been prior administrations who said we got to do something about this, right? You can only kick this can so far down the road, and we found out it stops on Saturday, Sunday, just passed. Yeah. The can kicking stops, right? And all of us collectively pay for that. We have got to figure out how to not delay so much maintenance and have a better schedule of maintenance. Don't forget, we were under consent decree for improving things, and we haven't met those goals. I think this administration has a lot of accountability that when informed and smart people ask the right questions, that they can song and dance their way through with people who are less informed and feel, okay. But people who know, the people who know how to read, who follow documents, who follow documentations, who know we ought to be further ahead in these repairs than we are, got to start asking some questions, and they have to be held accountable. So sometimes you can't do anything about when that pipe was in the ground. It's before everybody, but it's on your watch. And when it's on your watch, it's on your watch. COVID was on Agent's watch. Right. The Snowmageddon was on Agent's watch. Yeah. Two once a century things happened. Yeah. And all people could think is he ran for Senate. Like at the same time, we didn't go into the Red River when we could have gone, you would think idealistically, metaphorically, we could have gone into the but we stayed afloat during COVID, and no other person can say, "Here's how I did it," because you never had a COVID. Here's how I did it in Snowmageddon. You never had that right there. So I think it's always easy to be a Monday morning quarterback, and I don't want to do that, but I would just suggest that this water crisis has said that we need accountability.
What's your opinion on the DA race?
So I think that I'm offended by the consistent or persistent attempt by factions in our community to put up unqualified or less qualified people for parish-wide races like we did for sheriff and like it appears they're doing for DA. The sheriff was a 40-year law enforcement veteran with leadership experience at the highest level of every level of law enforcement. That's the most qualified person to ever run for sheriff. And he had to have 3 elections to be the person who didn't even know how to unlock a jail cell, who didn't even know, who has never driven a police car, who has never worn a badge. Yet it took 3 elections to defeat him because people in this community went all in for that guy with no experience for some reason. And maybe it's because he's a Republican. All right? You can guess whatever else you might think.
I almost said.
But a fully decorated person with no controversial past. You don't become a U.S. Marshal without the Senate approving this whole thing. You can do this, but then you're questioned at home. So it's amazing.
Let's keep it real. In Louisiana, in order to be an official over a law an agency, you just gotta be white, baby. It seems like that's all. You gotta be white. I guess they could say what they say, they're lawyers.
Yeah, but sheriffs are not typically lawyers.
Nah.
Now, district attorneys are usually lawyers, but here is a person who's a lawyer in this case, in the district attorney's race, who doesn't know what the inside of the courtroom really looks like, who has not been a prosecutor for perhaps for a longer time than you have, right? He has not been a person and you're talking about a chief prosecutor, right? So what happens is, what's troublesome is you bring a person whose ideology suggests that it is not the letter of the law that guides our prosecution, but our politics that guides our prosecution, which means you hire a bunch of henchmen who major in trying to see how many convictions they can get and lock up people who don't necessarily, I guarantee, look like them so much as they do look otherwise. And so that's the concern I have, because that's what the data says. You may not like the way I say it, but that's what the data says.
I've talked to him before. I'm scared of him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he
doesn't frighten me. I'm concerned about the fact that level of incompetence could be rewarded roles simply because of the privilege that person has to be to do this, right?
When I say I'm scared of him,
he hadn't been a great senator.
For me,
yeah,
I'm scared of him for what I think he's going to do to the community.
No doubt.
So whereas I believe that the district attorney's office here today, in crimes of violence, they are swift. They are they are tough on crime when it comes to crimes of violence. When it comes to crimes that may harm oneself more than others, they try to give people a chance to rehabilitate themselves.
Right, I agree.
So it's basically what I'm saying is they fair. You can't go in that courtroom with a bunch of times doing the same thing and think you're going to just walk away free.
Right.
That's not what's going on in Caddo Parish courtroom.
No, not at all.
When I had my issues in Caddo Parish courtroom, I had issues in Bossier Parish courtroom. So the things that you want to criticize Caddo for, Bossier did the same thing for me.
Right.
And to be honest, Bossier was a lot less lenient. I didn't pay as much to bond out, And I didn't get I got a harsher adjudication in cattle.
Right.
So this thing where cattle parish is catching and releasing, well, you got to have the evidence to convict somebody.
In fairness, you ought to catch and release if you don't have enough to convict somebody. And what that person goes out and does next has very little to do with what you have a responsibility to do there. You can't keep everybody. You don't know who's going to do what. I hate to see somebody go out and re-offend, but if they haven't offended first, it's not a re-offense, right? Mm-hmm. But if they do come to court, and even if they're bad actors, you got to have, the law says you got to have evidence, you know? Right. And so we have to do a better job when we're arresting people and those kind of things, making sure that there's enough to have a case and don't lay it at the feet of the district attorney. So I think you're right that he has proven to have a sense of speediness when it comes to how quickly justice will happen. There's been a sense of certainty that if you do something, you will, in fact, pay for it. And then there's a sense of severity, you know, that is going to be how tough the sentence is going to be. Is also so many previous administrations, previous district attorneys have only focused on severity. Mm-hmm. And it was all, you run on severity, right? When you should be talking about speediness for justice, you should be talking about certainty that if you commit a crime, you're going to get caught and you're going to go, and you're going to have a trial and you're going to be sentenced, right? But not just the severity of it all. And they've managed to keep what I think to be that triangle of accountability intact.
Well, I mean, a lot of these jails on the stock market, so you know.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna call this a lightning round. Mm-hmm. I kind of want one word out.
Sure.
Is Shreveport declining, rebuilding, or transforming?
Transforming.
A leader in this city you respect?
Most. Very few. I don't have a lot of respect for. So my one word would be most.
Okay.
Yeah.
A leader in this city you disagree with, but still respect?
I think Theron Jackson.
Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm.
What does revival look like outside church walls?
I think it looks like, it's hard for one word, I'm sorry. I think it looks like people being responsible for understanding that church is not just about worship, but it's about the community. And that for those of us, whether we consider ourselves church or Christians or not, we have a responsibility to be able to make sure the people in our communities have agency, that they have a sense access to justice, and they have a sense of refuge in their own communities, that they don't have to be victims in their own community. So I think we have to work to restore agency, justice, and refuge in Black communities. What's killing Black communities, no pun intended, is disorganization, right? So how do we reorganize our communities? Because people refer back to years and years ago, before you were born, before I was born, how communities were just tight-knit, man. You go down there and act a fool, they'd be whipped you down there and call your mama, and by the time you get home, you get another. You heard people talk, they weren't talking about wealthier communities. They were talking about organized communities. Right. And what's happened in our communities is that we've allowed disorganization. Again, architecturally, some architects of oppression have made sure that disorganization can reign in our communities. And whenever our communities are disorganized, the behavior we don't like takes full advantage of that disorganization.
All right. Thank you for coming through. Anything you want to say to my audience before we get out of here?
Man, I think I've said too much already. So I appreciate being able to engage with people willing to listen, have conversation, and I appreciate you talking about issues that matter. And I think that's what I always try to be a person who's about talking about the things that matter. And I don't even think we can do church by just talking about the Bible. We got to talk about things that matter and how, not pie in the sky, but a pound on the ground, right? What does that look like? And so I appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk with you and to do what I can to try to keep it a buck.
Yeah. And I appreciate you for coming through. Hopefully this won't be the last time, because you have a real good insight. It's often, well, not often, very few times I have a guest that come through and they give so much insight. I'll be like, I almost want to start another segment with this.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I appreciate it.